And the format we have chosen, as you can see right here, is Adobe Character Animator, of which I am a very big fan. It is a great puppetry software where you can turn around animations really quickly and get some really beautiful animations out of it, which is why we've chosen to create some Vambies in this format. And this video is going to be a step-by-step walkthrough, just to show you how quickly you can make animations in Adobe Character Animator. Right, so let's get started. The very first thing you're going to want to do is bring your character into Adobe Character Animator. So I'm assuming that you've downloaded your character from the Discord page and you now have it on your computer. So when you first come into Character Animator, this is what you're going to see. So you're going to go, first thing you're going to do, well, you can go New Project, and you're going to want to save this, you know, pick a name for your project. So let's just call this Vambies and press save. And then this is going to pop up. So you're going to go to File and you're going to go to Import, and wherever you've got your Vambies saved on your computer, you're going to find a little white icon file like this, and what you should see is Vambi version 1. Whatever, you know, the latest one we put up. It's most likely going to be version 1.6. So select that and go Import. Once you've done that, you're going to see that your file has appeared over on the left hand side of the screen in Project. Anything you import is going to appear here. Now you're looking at that and you're thinking, where's my puppet? What you got to do is go down to the bottom of the box here, bottom of the project box, and you're going to see this like movie clip icon. So if you click on that, it's going to open a scene. And your little character is going to pop up right in the middle. Now before we get into anything else, a couple of things to go over. On the right hand side here, this is where you control your camera and microphone and whatnot. If you're not seeing this straight away, what you got to do is click this little webcam icon to turn yourself on. Click this little mic icon, testing 1 2 3, to set up the automatic lip sync. And this one in the middle here is full body tracking. Now as you can see, my office is very small. You do need to be able to back up to get this one on. But when you can do it, I'll see if I can move back a little bit. You'll see that it will start tracking your movements. And if I was to get back even further, it will pick up my feet and it'll be able to move those around also. I'm just going to get a bit closer. Now, one of the first things you should do once you've got the camera on is calibrate it. So get yourself in a good position, comfortable, looking straight at the camera, and press calibrate. Now, if you want to do that for the body one, it does give you time to back up. So when you've got the body one on and you press calibrate, I think it's like a 5 or even 10-second countdown. So you press calibrate, move back into position, and then it'll calibrate to where you're standing. It works pretty well. Right, so let's just, oh no, I'll leave the lip syncing on. Right, so we've got your character in the middle of the screen. So one of the first things you're probably going to want to do is just place him where you want him. So over on the left hand side of the screen is all your, these are all the settings for all the different things that control your puppet. Most of them you won't want to tweak or mess around with, but I will explain what they are so that if you do, you know what to do. So the very first thing is transform. Oh, and before I carry on any further, what I am going to do when I edit all this video together is I am going to have chapters. Now if you're watching this on YouTube, you're most likely going to see them chapters below in description, and you can skip ahead because you might already know how to use Character Animator. And you might want to just, you know, get some of the tips and tricks I offer later on, and you might want to skip ahead, or you might be a complete novice and you want to go through the whole thing. If you're not watching on YouTube, I will put up an info bar somewhere around here, and I'll give it titles, and I'll leave that sitting up there, so you can scroll through the videos and just look for where the thing changes. I can tell you right now that I'm going to be talking about, like right now we're covering the whole importing them in, then I'm going to be talking about lip syncing, then I'm going to talk about how to use the triggers and the layering and recording motions and making replays and controlling the warp behavior, the camera system, the motion library, and when to use something like Adobe Premiere or After Effects, or how much of this you can do all in Adobe Character Animator. And you can do a lot in Adobe Character Animator. So those are the titles that you can be looking for to skip ahead. Right, back to what we're doing right now. The very first thing is transform. Over here, if you got a little arrow thing here just to collapse down the options. Now, first of all, you got scale. So you can control how big you want your character to be on screen. And then, you probably noticed you got position X, you got position Y. X is left and right. Y is up and down. And you've also got rotate, just in case, I don't know, you got him walking down a hill or something like that. Now, one of the very first tips I can give you is that obviously everyone's computers are different. Some are more powerful, some are less powerful. If your computer is maybe erring on the less powerful side, and you're running into any lag issues, there are cheats you can do. Now, if you click for, basically you want to animate your character as small as possible, because animate your character as small as possible, and then when you finish doing all your animation, you can scale him up and export it at a massive size. But whilst you're going through the whole animation process, keep it small, and it'll stop your computer from getting laggy. So if you click on scene, that's going to tell you how big your scene is. At the moment, I've got it on the classic 1080 HD size, and I've got it running at 25 frames per second. Some people go at 24, some people go at 30, some people go at 60. I got 25 because that is what was dictated to me on my previous project, and that's the template that it's currently sticking to. But let's size this down to 720 by 1280. And then if I wanted to, if my puppet was looking too big, I would have done what I just showed you, and I would have scaled it down and then plonk him in the middle of the screen. We'll get into backgrounds and moving the camera around and all that later on. But at the moment, your character's in the middle. That's where we want him. As I said, later on, you can, maybe what I would recommend later on is whatever you've animated in this scene, select your scene, go to edit, go to duplicate, and then if you press enter on there, that's going to give you the opportunity to rename it. So I'm going to call that one HD, and then I'm going to size that up to 1920 by 1080, or obviously you got, you can size up to 4K or 8K, but I'm just doing this for now. And this is an important tip. Even though I've got this selected, actually you'll notice it's still on the original one. So before you make any changes, make sure you've got the right scene selected, double click on it, and as you'll see now, this is sized at 1080. And then let's say this is all animated, you got everything done, you literally just then go down and size him up, because a lot of people, when they're doing animating in Adobe Character Animator, they will literally just animate their character in this program, and then once it's finished, they will export it either as a ping sequence or as a alpha file video, which means it's just your character and all the background is transparent, and then they might composite it into a bigger edit. So if you're using Adobe After Effects or Adobe Premiere, you might edit all your video and background scenery and live action and whatnot, and then animate your character in this, export it out and drop it in. That's why you can animate it small, but then you might want to size it up so you got your full HD version of it to export and bring into your other programs. Anyway, let's go back over into our 720 version. Right, so what I'll talk you through next is all the behaviors that you can see on the left hand side of the screen. Just explain what they all are. Right, first of all, number one, it's dragger. Now what dragger is being able to pull around certain parts of the body, like the hands. So there is a dragger on the palm of each hand, so you can move them around so that you can, make gestures with your hand. Now, as I showed you a little bit earlier, you can do this with full body tracking, but lots of people like to, have precision, and for example, if you've got a character and he's articulating a lot with his hands and he's, getting very excited or angry. Like if he's angry, he might be shaking his fists, or, it might be the start of a video and he might be waving. So, you're going to want to animate all those. So we'll get a bit more into motion animation a little bit later, but dragger is controlling that. So what you're specifically controlling here is, it doesn't give you a lot of options. Basically, range, which is, how near. So on each of the hands, there's a little anchor point, which is called dragger. Now, if you've got a really big range, like that ridiculous number, I can have the mouse all the way over here and still control the arm. However, if you've got draggers on other parts of the body, like if you had them on the feet, and they all had, the same wide range, when you do this, like for example, I'm going to turn the eyes onto mouse control. So as you can see, not only am I moving the hands, it's moving the eyes as well. So what you're going to want to do normally is keep that range real low. Just keep it to about 10. So that really does just limit it to you clicking on where that anchor point is. And the only other difference is hold in place or return to rest. So for example, at the moment, if I drag the arms to here, that is where they're going to stay. But if I change it to return to rest, when I move them arms, they're going to automatically, once you release, once you take your finger off the mouse and release it, it's going to go back. Now some people, lots of people, like to use Adobe Character Animator to animate in real time. And I have known plenty of people that use touchscreen monitors. So this is where return to rest is beneficial. So if you are literally using your touchscreen and you are moving the hands, like to wave and stuff like that, when you're performing live and you've done a little wave, you want the arms to go back to where they are. You don't want them to stay stuck up in the air. However, when you're animating on the timeline, you probably will want to hold them in place, and that will become apparent a little bit later in the video when I explain how to make motions on the timeline. Anyway, the number one, dragger, that's what that does. Number two, eye gaze. It gives you a couple of options here. Number one, as you can see, as default, so whenever you load a character in, the default is going to be on is camera input. So if you look at the left hand side of the screen here and you look at my eyes, you can see that it is tracking where I'm looking, and that is converting to our digital puppet. Again, can be good when you're performing a character in real time. I personally prefer keyboard or mouse. So if I press left and right on the keyboard, I have actually got walk activated at the moment, so let's just go down and turn that off. We'll come to that one in a minute. If I press left and right on the keyboard, or up and down, that is moving the pupils around. It gives me a much more precise motion with them. And if I've got the character talking to the audience, at the moment I've got his eyes locked in where I want him to look. Or even if it's animating on a timeline, you know, I can set up them eyes to be, you know, looking where they want and they're not. When you've got the camera input, I do find that they kind of wander around a little bit, but each to their own. Some people really like that behavior. The mouse, sorry, the keyboard is my preference, or as I just said, the mouse. So this is good for more precision. So imagine you've got this character and he's doing a news report, and you've got a TV screen up here, and you want him specifically looking there. Or if you've got other characters and them characters are running around, you can be much more precise with where he's looking, because obviously with the keyboard you just kind of got left and right, up and down, maybe a bit of a diagonal if you press two at the same time. But yeah, with the mouse you can be a lot more precise where you've got him looking. Smoothing, basically, as it says, it just smooths the transition. So at the moment it's pretty quick. If I was to bang that all the way up, you can see now it's a lot more slower. Or if I was to put that down to nothing, it's going to be instant. But as a default, I normally keep that on 15. Camera strength is, you know, how strongly it picks up. At the moment it's pretty, you know, following me fine. If I was to turn that all the way down and put the camera input back on, now as you can see I'm looking around and the eyes aren't tracking at all. Basically camera strength controls the sensitivity of how it tracks your pupils. I'm going to put that back to 100. And again, everyone's got different webcams, everyone's got different lighting. You're going to want to play around with that setting yourself. In fact, I'll probably, even on my one, I'll probably put it down to about 75%. And again, you can control the strength of the input for the mouse as well. So at the moment it moves around. But if I was to put that down to only 20%, them eyes aren't going to move as much. So if I put that to 70, you know, it keeps, again, this is something for you to tweak around. Oh, and one last thing, you got snap eye gaze. Now the reason that this was put up is that Adobe thought it will give it a more of a traditional cartoon. So like some cartoons, you think of like Scooby-Doo and stuff like that, they got more limited animation, and so often, you know, the eyes will just dart around and whatnot. And it's just to give that more kind of limited animation, old style traditional cartoony thing. So that's because I've got the mouse clicking at the same time, because I've got everything turned on here. But yeah, again, it's down to personal preference. You can, I normally have it turned off, but you can play around with all of these. Right, leader follower is not something you need to worry about with the Bambi puppet. That is a much more advanced thing for when you're building and rigging a puppet. If you do want to get into Adobe Character Animator and you do want to learn more about the rigging side of things, I would highly recommend checking out OK Samurai's page on YouTube. Now that might not sound like an official Adobe page, but what happened is one of the team members in Adobe started using his own YouTube channel to start making tutorial videos for how to use Adobe Character Animator, and it became so popular that it got adopted as the official Adobe Character Animator information page. So for additional information, and there are lots of videos on there about everything and all the latest updates, and also community videos on what other people are doing with Adobe Character Animator, check out OK Samurai, also known as David Werner, one of the head creative developers at Adobe Character Animator. Highly recommend that. Yeah, loads of information there. Right, LimIK. Right, this controls, again, it comes down to the sensitivity of how well your arms bend and move and your legs bend and stuff like that. I don't want to get too bogged down into a deep dive into everything to do with Adobe Character Animator, because this video will go on for hours and hours and hours, and most of you aren't going to be interested in every single little thing. This character is being rigged up, so it should work perfectly fine for you. Again, if you do want to know more about any of these individual behaviors, check out OK Samurai, because he has videos on every single one, and most of them videos aren't very long, but they are more specific. So we're going to skip over Lim OK. Lip sync, again, this character is all set up for lip sync. You don't need to worry about that. If you want to know more about it, check out the official videos that does a more deep dive. Now the mocap body one is one that you probably are going to want to no, sorry, I'm thinking ahead there to body one. So mocap body, anything that is called mocap obviously is a motion capture behavior. So this one controls the body strength. Really the only thing you need to play around with here is the tilt strength and the head position strength. So at the moment, if I just move the character around, you can see that's how much my motion capture is affecting the character. Again though, everyone's computer is different, everyone's camera is different, so you might want to play with this. So the tilt strength really controls how much that body is tilting around. I've got this set on 35, but you know, if you go over the top, or if you don't do it enough, like if I turn it down to nothing, you see the body isn't tilting at all. So that is one that you can play around with if you feel that you need to make some adjustments. Head position strength, I got it on 75. If I turn that down to nothing, you see there are other things controlling the motion capture. So this is where it gets a bit finicky. You do have to play around with these things, but I'm going to keep that on 75. The other ones, parallax and all that, you can ignore those. So really, if you do want to adjust anything, it's just tilt and head position strength. This is body tracker, don't need to worry about that. Motion library, we'll come back to that later. Physics, that's when you've got, if you've got a character with hair or things dangling, really good thing, but as you can see, this particular character doesn't have any physics. However, some of the other Vambies do have physics. In fact, I'll swap one in right now. So I'm going to bring in, so we're going to do the importing thing again. We're going to go to import, and we're going to find a girl Vambi who is called Vilo, and I'm going to import her in. And you can see she's popped up in the corner. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to drag her down into the timeline. And yet again, we're going to go to transform and place her. Whoop. Let's put her next to him here. Bring her up a bit. She's a bit too big, so let's bring her down a little bit. And if you basically see this red dot, whichever one you select is the one that you're going to be controlling. Now here's another big tip, so pay attention. When controlling and animating characters in Adobe Character Animator, I would highly recommend just animating one at a time. Don't have them all turned on. The more characters you got on the screen and switched on, you're going to start seeing a bit of a lag issue. So where possible, turn off any other character you have. Obviously, you know, you can keep track of where they are so that you know you can have the characters looking at them. And also later on when you bring the audio in, that's a good way of animating, because you know when your character's talking, you know, they can be moving around, and then when they're not talking, just make sure they're looking and reacting to the other character. But anyway, yeah, where possible, just have one character at a time. As you can see, the eyes on her have automatically gone back to camera tracking, which, as you know, I don't like. So I'm going to put it onto mouse. Anyway, the reason I brought her in, it says you can, was just to demonstrate the physics. So she's got a bit of physics on her hair, so it's got a dangle effect. Now with this you can adjust the gravity, so that's how much the gravity affects the item. At the moment I've got it turned to about 5%. Gravity direction, obviously at the moment I've got it 180, so it's pulling it down, but I could adjust that so that, you know, it's maybe if, like, you know, in your scene it's windy, so you might want the thing going to the side. You can even add wind strength, so if I was to turn wind on, it'll start, you know, fluttering in that direction, and you can change the variation to get that, you know, wind effect. If you've got another character who's got clothing and hair, you can add all these physics to those, but let's just put all this back to the default. Collision, I'm not going to get into that. That's more about interacting with other items on the screen. Again, you can do a deep dive into specific videos about physics in Character Animator. The only other thing I'm going to show you here is squashiness and stiffness at the moment. It's got a little bit of movement, but if I was to turn the stiffness all the way down, you can see it gets a bit more flopsy. Squashiness as well. It's just, you know, it's one of those where you just play around with it. You can have something more rigid, or you can have something more loose and floppy and whatnot. So that is physics. Transform, I've already gone over a little bit. You know, your positions, your scale, your rotation, your opacity. You can bring all these into the timeline to adjust them, you know, like, but again, I'm going to go into that later on, so let's skip ahead. Triggers. This is basically so that you can use all the triggers that I've got embedded into the character, which I have not gotten to yet. You'll see that I've done a whole bunch of full face animations, but you can also control the individual elements such as the mouth, the eyebrows and the eyelids, and also pre-made arm triggers. So let's have a look at some of them. First of all, make sure we've got the right character selected. Right, so you got smiling, sad, a kind of you know, like surprised, you know, impressed, shocked, kind of, it's a grin, but he looks a bit sneaky, sly. That's him kind of quizzical, you know, not understanding, confused. That's just another happy face. That's a unimpressed, angry face. That's a more, you know, content face. That's unimpressed. That's mad. And that's a bit like perplexed, like, well, what's going on here? Now, those are just a couple that I pre-made for you, and they do cover a wide range of expressions. However, a bit like a Mr. Potato Head, you can control all these by themselves, and you can mix and match them, and you can make even more expressions. You know, you might want, you know, his angry face, and or he might be like, if you was to use the angry mad eyebrows but put a big smile, that will give him a more kind of demonic evil look. So, you know, you can mix and match all those. I am going to get into that a bit more later on. However, the main thing that this trigger thing does is that it turns that on or off. So if you got that turned off, none of them triggers are going to work. Why would you want to do this? Because when you've got the triggers turned on and you've recorded a trigger, whilst they are turned on, when you are animating, those triggers aren't showing up, and when you turn it off, they do. Again, I'll get into that a little bit later, so don't worry too much about that. Walk, that's a good one. I'm actually going to get into that a little bit later on, because that's a bit more of a, you know, a bit more in depth. I need to get into that, and walk behavior is certainly something you're going to want to have your character do if you have a bit more of a advanced animation. And then all of these, mocap face, neck shadow, arm draggers, these are all more part of the character build up. You don't really need to adjust them too much. The only one you might want to adjust is the one that says mocap face, because yeah, you're definitely going to want the mocap face, and then you'll also see mocap face flipped. The reason for that is that if you press Z on your keyboard or press this little button here, I've got trigger turned off, so I'm going to have to turn that back on. You know, I've also got the character set up from the other perspective. So whatever adjustments you make in this one for mocap face, you're going to have to copy and do the same one in flipped. Right, so head scale strength, that is like at the moment it's down low. If I was to turn that right up, if you lean towards the camera, you're going to get much more of the head scaling up as if he's like looking at the camera. So that's what head scale strength is. Head tilt strength, pretty self-explanatory. I've got it on 8%. If I was to turn it all the way down, his head is going to tilt too much. If I turn it to nothing, it's not going to tilt at all. Eyebrow strength, again self-explanatory. You can track your eyebrows. If you turn that strength up, you know, you can see it's over the top. Again though, those settings might need to be tweaked as per everyone's different settings. I've got them set up as a default, which I think will work best for most people, but again you might want to adjust it. Eyelid strength, there is a version in Adobe Character Animator where you can have motion capture eyelids. I find them, they can work really good, but not always. So this character eyelids are actually, what's happening here is when you blink, it's triggering an animation, a pre-made animation, to control the to action. Basically, when you blink, it's telling the computer to trigger the blink animation. Now, with this, if you got the eyelid strength turned all the way down, it's not noticed. It's basically controlling the sensitivity. If I was to turn it all the way up, any little, you know, movement of the eye is going to trigger it. 100, I think is just fine. I don't think you need to play around with that. Mouth strength, you don't need to play around with that. Parallax strength is how much you want that face to move along. So if I, at the moment it's on 100, if I move that up to 200, it's going to move the face. It's going to give the face more, almost like 2.5D effect, moving it around. So that is one you might want to play with, but for the moment I'm just going to leave it on 100%. But certainly, you know, pop that up to 200, 300 and get that face moving around, so it gives it more of a, you know, head turn effect. And raise, at the moment I've just got it very low, but if I was to turn that up, you'll see them eyebrows tilt up, or tilt down, just to get more expression in them eyebrows. Again, it's up to you to play around with. Move eyebrows together. At the moment they're locked in, so they'll move together. But if I was to turn that off, theoretically, you know, some people can really control their eyebrows. You know, like move one up. I can't do that. You know, mine seems to just move together anyway. But if you're one of them people that can adjust your eyebrows individually, then you might want that turned off. But at the moment it's turned on. And then at the bottom here are your replays. But I'm going to get into that later on. So that brings us to the end of my semi-quick tutorial on what all these behaviors do in the left hand corner. Right, part 3, lip syncing. As you can see right now, the character is lip syncing to me live, and what you can do, I'm just going to get timeline back on here. Let's just zoom in a little bit. So the most basic straightforward thing that you can do is just press record and record what you're saying in real time. So I'm just going to press record and go testing a 1 2 3, testing a 1 2 3. Stop it, and Adobe Character Animator will record your vocal. All these things that you can see down here is actually my mocap. Come back to that later. Let's just concentrate on the vocal at the moment. You see right down here is a little slider, and that's for zooming in and out of the timeline. Always handy to know. Sometimes you want to zoom right in. So once you've recorded a vocal, you can see that your audio file is up here, and then below it is the visamins. So what the computer interpreted as what you're saying as being the correct visamin. Sometimes it does a great job, sometimes it needs a bit of cleaning up. If it needs a bit of cleaning up, what you do is you right click and you swap it for the lip sync that, you know, the visamin that you want. So for example, here it got oo. Maybe you want it to be more of a ah shape, so you change it to ah. And also you would have noticed then I've just stretched it out, because you know, the one thing that it can't really do is that it's lip syncing to you as you talk. But as you know, or this is a little animation tip, most people when they're talking, they open their mouths before, you know, when you just start a sentence, before you start talking. So sometimes when it's lip syncing in real time, it might seem like a fraction out. So at the beginning, it's always handy to just, you know, drag that time, you know, that visamin to be a bit longer. If it's dropped in some visamins that if you think it's dropping in too many visamins, you can, you know, stretch it over the top of other ones and bring it in like that. If there's ones in there where you think there shouldn't be one because it's picked up a bit of background noise, you can right click and you go silent, and that deletes it out. And I do have a method for a more advanced lip syncing way for your animations, but I'm going to get to that a little bit later in when we go about animating on the timeline, because it's just more suited. You'll understand why when I get to it. This at the moment is the more basics, you know, to the point lip syncing usages tips and tricks and whatnot. So right, so number one, it can you just press record and it'll just record what you're saying in real time, and then you'll see it drop down the visamins. If you're happy with it, great. You know, if you press play, you probably can't hear that because I'm not recording my audio, my screen audio. I will update that in a bit, so that a bit later on in the video, if you need to hear what's being said, you can do. But anyway, trust me, you can hear my voice there. And if you're happy with that, great. If not, then like I said, you can go in and you can change them visamins, and you can, you know, stretch them out or make them shorter, or, you know, move them around and whatnot. Also, if there's one that hasn't appeared at all where you think there should be one, you can right click and just drop one in. And if you think that shouldn't be connecting there, if you press Alt, you get this little slice tool. So hold Alt on your keyboard, press the slice tool, and then you can get rid of that. Now, that's one way of doing it. Oh, in fact, before I get to the second way, if you go to Edit and go to Preferences and go to Lip Sync, you can adjust the strength, the sensitivity of the lip syncing. Again, it's one of those where you just need to play around because everyone's mic is different. What's right for me isn't necessarily right for you. So this basically controls how sensitive the mic is. So as it says there, set the threshold of how loud the audio needs to be to enable a lip sync. So let's say you've got a bit of background noise, like your computer fan is humming, as mine does sometimes, and you don't want it to pick that up. You can adjust this so that it's only going to be picking up your voice and not the low end hum in the background. However, there's also other ways of muting it. Basically, you got camera based muting. So basically, the idea of this is that the camera will only do the lip syncing when it sees your mouth is moving. And the reason for that is that if you've got people talking around you, or you got a co-host or something like that, and they're talking on a separate feed and whatnot, and you don't want this to be lip syncing to other vocals, this will not lip sync unless it sees your mouth moving. At the moment, I've got this set down to nothing. But if I was in a situation where there was people around me, I might set this up to strong. Again, you're just going to have to play around with the sensitivity that suits your situation. And Visamin detection, as you can see down here, you might feel that it's dropping too many Visamins. If you think it's dropping too many, you can drop this down so it will only drop in less. Or if you think it's not dropping enough and you want your mouth to be a lot more active, you can move it up to make it stronger. So that's good to know. Okie dokie. So right, as I said, there's two methods. Number one is the live one. Number two, and the one that lots of people like to use, is the pre-recorded one. So you might want to, especially if you're doing something really professional, or maybe you're working with a client who is providing you with the audio file, or you're not happy with your own speaking voice. I know I don't particularly have, I always prefer to use other people where possible. Or if you've got your character singing, you don't think you can sing and you need someone else to sing. Anyway, lots of reasons that you might not want to use your own voice. Or you might, I suffer with this. Like even now, you'll probably notice it. You can get a bit tongue-tied and whatnot, and you might want to work off of a script, and you might want to pre-record that and get it all polished. So you've made your audio file, and then you want to bring it in. You go back up to File, and you go to Import, and you go to where you've saved your audio file, and you select it, and you import it. You can use Wave, you can do AFS audio file. You can use most audio files. So import it, and then you drag it down to the timeline. And I'm just going to delete what I did before. And so you select your audio file, and then you hold Control, and you select your puppet file, your main puppet file, and then you go to Timeline, and you go Compute Lip Sync from Scene Audio. Now you'll see a second option, which is Compute Lip Sync from Audio and Transcript. Now the reason for that, if I select the audio file, if you've created a closed caption file for your audio, you can import it here. So like, let's say for example, like if you use audio, what's it called in Adobe? I always bring audio files into Premiere, because the Premiere is a kind of catch-all thing. And then I, after I've edited the file up and tweaked all the sound settings and the levels and all that sort of stuff, there's a setting in there for creating transcripts, auto capture. And you can then export that transcript, and you can import that file into here. And the idea is that when Character Animator actually has the script for your audio that matches your audio, you'll get an even better lip sync. Again, you can go to the OK Samurai YouTube channel, and there are videos that explains it in a bit more information than that, though more or less what I've just said is all you really kind of need to know. But for now, we just got your audio file, so we go to Timeline, and we've got the two things selected, and we're going to go to Compute Lip Sync from Scene Audio, and then it's going to compute it. And same as before, you see that you got all your Visamins, and as I mentioned before, it's the same thing. You can adjust them, change them, stretch them out and whatnot. And later on I will show you a more advanced way of getting really nice lip syncing, which is in the next part. So let's skip ahead to part 4. Part 4, triggers and layering. Right, chapter 4 is how to use triggers and swap sets in the timeline. The swap set one is actually really important because it enables users to make animations really quickly. It just speeds up the process. What used to take people days, weeks, months to animate can now be done in hours, in a very short amount of time, and by one person instead of a team of people. Because once upon a time, if you go back to the early days, you had to draw everything frame by frame, and even that process was set up by a whole team. You'd have one person animating your main keyframes So, you know, like, I don't know, Donald Duck kind of here, and then here, and then here. But then they would have a team of people that would animate the in-betweens. So they would, on like a light board, they would have the two keyframes, and then they would animate the frames going into it. And then you'd have another person that would paint and colour all those and outline. It was a whole massive process. However, now with digital puppetry, you can basically, what you do now is that you make all the animations, you embed them into the puppet, and it reduces the amount of things that you have to do in the timeline. So anyway, first of all, as I showed you earlier, you got all these triggers. So how do we get on from there onto the timeline? Well, there are a couple of ways. First of all, you can record them live. Now, in Adobe Character Animator, the best way to do stuff really is to do it in sections. You can do it all at once. If I've had characters set up, and it's a bit like playing a musical instrument. You can assign each of these expressions a key on your keyboard, and the way to do that is if you change this to layout, select your trigger, trigger, and then press a key on your keyboard. In fact, no, that should be X. And that one can be C, V, B, you know, and so on. And then go back to perform. Now, if I press them on a keyboard, it triggers them expressions. And the reason I say it's a bit like playing a musical instrument is that when I used to do a live show and perform characters in real time, obviously you want your characters to emote. You know, that's what brings them to life. That's what gives them, you know, makes them feel like people are actually talk. You know, this cartoon character isn't some soulless puppet. It's actually a real thing with emotions. So, you know, you can trigger off them emotions. And also, not only live performances, I have made animations in the past where we had a very, very short deadline. You know, very tight deadline. We had to get things fast, animated fast. So I did rig up a system where I literally had a pre-recorded audio. I'd listen to it, familiarise myself with it a little bit, and then try and do as much as possible in real time. So whilst I was recording, I would record my whole action. I would be firing off the expressions because I knew when, you know, someone was about to be happy, sad, and you can get a lot done that way. And then, you know, you're not stuck with whatever you do. You can go back and adjust it, as I will show you now. So the first approach is to do it live. So I'm going to press record, and I'm going to hit some of these triggers. So my character's really happy. I'm going to give him a big smile. He's walking down the street, and then whoa, something surprises him. Right, stop it. I'm going to just move this out of the way for the minute so we can see the timeline a bit better. A couple of things now to pay attention to is, number one, it's recorded over my lip sync, because it's recording my you know, it was recording what I said. So next time you record, make sure that the lip sync option in behaviors is turned off. By turning, whatever you turn off won't be recorded. So if I was to record it again, we won't get this, but just select that one. Now the reason it's selecting everything is that sometimes you might want to batch delete stuff and you don't want to go through and select each individual frame, and that's handy. But other times, like now, when I just want to select one thing, you don't want it selecting everything. So you got to go to timeline, and where it says link recording selection, you want that turned off. That means I can select one thing at a time. So I'll delete that audio. In fact, I won't delete that audio because it goes with what I'm going to delete the old audio and the old lip syncing. So that now is what I just recorded. So let's press play and have a quick playback to see how it looks. So my character's really happy. I'm going to give him a big smile. He's walking down the street and then, whoa, something surprises him. Right, so a couple of things here. As you can see, once we've all these, let's move this up here. I've got a bunch of swap sets, and what these swap sets are 1 second. So I've got one swap set which has all the facial expressions in, one swap set that has all the mouth expressions in, one for the eyebrows, eyelids, and so on. What that means is it gives you this bar. So this bar here is all the triggers. And if we zoom out a little bit, you can stress that bar for however long your animation is going to go on for. Why is this important? Well, instead of you having to then go and record live every action that you want to put in, all you have to do is go along here, right click, and pick whatever expression you want to drop in. And that's it. It's like you can just go through and just drop in all your animation. And for the ones that you've already got, so this surprise one here, I think, I don't want him to be surprised. I want him to be more quizzical. So now, when we press play, really happy. I'm going to give him a big smile. He's walking down the street and then, whoa, something surprises him. It's as simple as that. You just swap out what you want. All these swap sets don't automatically show up on your timeline. So here's a little hacky trick. First of all, I'm going to turn off the, make sure that lip sync isn't going to record. And also another, as I said, it's about layering. So I might be really happy with, so my character's really happy, my body motion there, and I don't want to record that again. So over here, I'm going to hold down Control and then press this little red thing, and that's going to turn everything off. So Control and press there, it's going to turn off everything, and then you can just select what you want to record. In my case right now, I just want to record the triggers. I'm going to bring this back over. Right, so as we know, we've got a swap set for expressions, but we've already got that in there, so we don't need to worry about that. But I'd also like to be able to do the same thing for the mouth. Oops, put that in. The mouth, the eyelids. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press record, and I'm going to make sure I hit the mouth. It doesn't matter which mouth, it doesn't matter which eyebrow, and it doesn't matter which eyelid, as long as you press you got them. And I'm going to press stop, and there you go. You can see now the swap set bars for each of those. I'm going to delete off those because I don't want them. All I want is that bar, and I'm going to select them bars. I'm going to move this out of the way for a second, and I'm going to stretch that out for however long my animation might go for. And now I can go through and, you know, the way I would record something normally is I would bring in the audio file first, get the lip syncing done, then I would drop in my body sway motions, and then I was dropping all my expressions and just very quickly layer it up, and before you know it, your animation's done. It's that simple. So yeah, you just go along, right click, and drop in whatever one you want. And as I said earlier, this is where you get to mix and match. So I've gone for a surprised mouth, sad eyebrows, and lower eyelids raised. And let's see what expression that gives us. Kind of gives him a bit of a smug look. Now, what you'll notice is that when I'm not playing, when I'm not scrolling through it or playing it, it goes back to default. What you need to do here is just turn off triggers for the moment, and then you can see. So at the moment, a surprised look, sad eyebrows, and them eyelids drop down, kind of gives him it's a bit of a smug look. But that is an expression that isn't on all the ones I've done there. So that's an example of this is where you get to mix and match. Like you might think, I don't want him to look smug, I want him to look more angry. So that's where we can drop in them eyebrows instead. And maybe we want a more squinty look. See, now he's got more of an evil look to him. Just play around with it. That's the power of using swap sets. However, there is one more thing that is really good, and this goes back to what I mentioned in the lip syncing in chapter 3, where I said about advanced lip syncing. There's two sets of mouths. I've got the mouth set up for the Visamins, and then I've just got mouth set up for expressions, and they're set up in two different ways for a reason. When I'm talking, like for example, the expressions are made to animate into it and then animate out, in, out, in, out. Very fluid animation to give it a more advanced look, opposed to it being a more choppy single frame thing, which like things like Scooby-Doo and old Hanna-Barbera cartoons would have like single frame animation, where if you look at something like The Simpsons, when they're talking, their mouths are animating in and out of the Visamins. However, these ones here are set up to basically animate into it and then cut off. Reason is, when you're talking and you can have all these Visamins really quick, if they animate out, by the time they've animated in and animated out, you know, the other sound is just mess it all up. So they need to be able to animate in and then cut out as soon as the other one comes in. However, what that does is that at the end of a sentence, it can seem a bit choppy. So if you look at that R there, it animates into the R, but then as soon as it gets to the end, it goes straight back to default. It gives it a clipped, choppy look, which, you know, it's fine, but you can get it looking a bit more advanced looking. And the way you do that, so now I know that that R is the end of the sentence, I'm going to delete it, and I'm going to find my mouth expression right here, and I'm going to drop in the R. Drop in the R. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, make sure I've got that butted up. Okay. So now you'll see it not only animates into it, but when it's finished, it animates out of it, and it gives it a much more fluid thing. And also sometimes, you know, like you might have a sound effect like, hey, you know, you don't need, you can, that's where you might just drop in like a bigger, like I might want this like happy mouth instead, might suit it. It'll be like, hey, or if he's shouting, I don't know, mad. Grr. So, you know, it also gives you the opportunity to drop in some other mouth sets that might suit better. So that is why I said wait till chapter 4 to get into that. Right, so I've explained the triggering, I've explained the swap sets. So yeah, I think that's the end of this chapter. Let's get on to the next chapter. Right, chapter 5. Recording motions and making replays. Replay triggers. Right, I don't need this one for the minute. Right, so I've alluded to this a little bit before, but we'll go into it in a bit more detail because it's important. Right, so let's just zoom out. And right, so as you know from the previous chapter, I've turned off all the body actions. Now, if you press Control and select any of these, it's going to pick all of them again. It's much quicker to do, because you'll see there's a load of motion capture elements. It's much quicker to select everything and just turn off the few things you don't want. So for example, you won't want the lip sync on, and you might want to turn the triggers off. Now the reason that you want to turn the triggers off is that when you're animating, so yeah, what I would say is that when you're animating something, get the audio down first and then get the expressions in and maybe record the motion capture last. The reason is that, you know, as you can listen to the audio and see the expressions and then like move. So like if you got a character like surprise, you can back up. Or if they're talking in a more sing-songy way, you can match your movements to suit what's going on screen. And also, what you record first normally is just the base level, and then you'll layer stuff on top of it. So I'll show you what I mean. So let's just I'm going to listen to this, and I'm going to record over what we've already done. So my character's really happy. I'm going to give him a big smile. He's walking down the street, and then whoa, something surprises him. Right, so that's my base thing, and as you can see, this take has now overlapped the one that come before it, and you'll see that all of these. So you got basically anything called mocap is what's being recorded. So you got the mocap for the body, that's recording the body movements. The neck shadow is this little bit of shadow on the neck, self-explanatory. The face, this is controlling mainly like the parallax on the face and the eyebrow strengths and all that bits and bobs. And then the reason there's two lots is that it's also what you've just done theoretically is also recording the body flip as well. So if I flip the body, well, I never recorded the body flip, but the point is that it's been recorded not only for this side but the other side too. Anyway, let's say that you recorded this action and you're pretty happy with it, but you want to make some adjustments to the overall body thing, like this bit here when he goes whoa. You might want to emphasize it more. So what you can do here is this: get yourself into a pose that you want, so calibrate it, and then I'm going to pull him back like this, and I'm going to tilt my head like he's over. Whoa. And I want to add in some body action, so I'm going to throw the arms up here, drag them into place, and this, going right back to what I was saying earlier, is why you don't want them to drop down. You want them to hold in place, because I've got him in that pose now. I'm going to hold him there, and there's two ways of doing this. You can either press record, or the better way is go up to timeline and record a 2-frame take, or one, like just 2-frame, or you can go control and number 2. Right, now if we zoom in a little bit, you can see you got this take. Obviously you want it to be longer than that, so we're going to stretch that out. And these little squares at the start and end are your blends. So at the moment it just kind of cuts into it, and that doesn't look great. You don't want it to just cut into it like that. You want it to animate into it. So we're going to blend it in. And at the moment, this goes back to also what I mentioned earlier about the linking thing. You've just done that pose. This is where you want to be able to select what. At the moment, now I'd have to go through and select every frame, which can take up time. So if I select link recording selection, everything that was recorded in that take will be selected. See, everything is highlighted. I'm just going to blend that in, and it's up to you if you think it's too quick or too slow. And also if you right click here, blend in curve, you can ease in, you can ease out, or you can ease in and out. Now unlike Adobe Animate and stuff like that, you don't have a more advanced anchor point adjustment thing for this. You've literally just got no easing, in, out, and in and out. And if you want to adjust the speed of it and whatnot, the way you do that is by dragging this little square icon. And then out. Sometimes I find with a character animator, the out movements can sometimes kind of stick a bit, or because I find it's better to ease in, so it ease into the final frame, so actually it moves out quicker. And then, so basically now this is a layer overlapping the base layer that we recorded. So if we press play, whoa. And let's say we like that arm movement. You know, we're pretty happy with how that's looking, and we might want to use it again. Well, then what we're going to do is select them individual frames. So this is, once again, you're going to have to turn off because you don't want to select everything. I'm going to select the draggable elements, so the hand, so draggers. And then we're going to right click, and it says create, replay and trigger. So if you select that, and then if you look at the left hand side of the screen and go down to replays, you'll see at the bottom here it's come up as draggers. So if we press enter on that, and let's just call that like arms up, press enter. And now if I press this, it's an action that you can, you know, use again and again. You don't have to pose it again. In fact, whilst I've just picked the arms on their own there, if I wanted the whole body action, so if I select all the frames, and again create, replay and trigger, press enter, and I'm going to call this like whoa effect, because it was like whoa. And I press play and turn the camera off so you can see the effect there. In fact, let's scroll along to here. Right, and now if I press this, it's not just moving the arms, it's the whole body moving as well. So you can create a whole body trigger. And I'll tell you now, that saves loads of time when it comes to animating, because most of the time people use the same gestures, you know, like point left, point right, wave, you know, gesture down. You know, after a while there's only so many gestures that your character will do. And this particular character, it's got two set of arms. The reason for that is so that we get this nice, because if I just had that arm cut off there, when I would have pulled it up here, you would have had the line disappearing. So there's an arm behind it with an outline. So as that kind of comes out, it fills in the line behind, but I can also keep this one so it goes over the face. Gives it a more advanced look. But there are two set of arms. Now, sometimes you get like a ghosting effect where the arm behind doesn't seem to sink into, or basically, all you need to do with that is give the arm a little bit of a tweak, and then it works completely fine. It's just a thing with Character Animator. Every program has the little tweaks that you have to work around. So yeah, this is a great way of saving time. And as you can see here, there's already a whole bunch of preset arm actions that I've already made. And you see that when you've created them here, they also show up over in the trigger section. Once they've showed up over there, you can drag them across into controls, and then you can use them as a trigger as well. And either here you can select in this box, or as I showed you earlier, press layout and press a button. So let's say we got A, go back to perform. Now I press A on my keyboard. Again, I've just restarted the scene. So there you go. That is chapter 5, recording motions and how to make replays. This is like one of the most important things, like I say, in terms of speeding up time. It's a great tool to work with. So anyway, let's get into the next chapter. Right, chapter 6, which we're going to go over the walk behavior. You'll notice me keep looking off to the side. I've got my little list of, you know, what to talk about. Right, yeah, so a couple of things. Oh, I don't need this on because we're not doing the playback at the moment. So first of all, as I mentioned earlier, if you look on the left hand side of the screen down at the properties, look down and you'll see at the moment we've got the walk turned on. So if I press left and right on the keyboard, the little man will walk around. And before I get into anything else, let's just go over the settings for this. There's a couple of different ways that you can control the puppet. Right, so first of all, you got mode. So you can control it immediate, and basically all that does is that as soon as the scene plays, you'll start walking. Probably don't want to use that. Left and right arrow, which is self-explanatory, as you can see I'm got here. And the other one is position based. I'll circle back on that in a second. So let's have a look at what these other settings do, and then I'll get back into the position based one because that's an important one that requires a bit more attention. Right, so first of all you got stop and easing. Basically at the moment if I press left and right, there's a little bit of moving up the mark, but it's pretty quick. If I was to turn that down to nothing, it will just cut straight to walk, which granted it's not much of a big difference there from what I had it. But if I was to put that up to, like, I don't know, 2 seconds, see what I mean? It's a slower stop and start. It might be a good one if he's running and you want him to slowly stop. But generally, 0.5, even that seems a bit slow, so stick with the template 0.2. Now stride length. Now all of these here are ones that you can have a bit of a play around with. Stride length is just literally, I'll demonstrate. So if I was to turn that down, you see his legs movements a lot shorter. If I was to pull it up, more like a run. So that's why that is handy to adjust. Step speed, that's how. So if we turn that up, that is how fast he moves, obviously. Now body speed is not only how fast he moves, but if he moves at all. If I put that down to nothing, he'll just stay in the spot. And that might be all that you want, because if you're compositing this in something else, for example, you might want him like that, and then you might have the background moving instead. So that's what that is. Or you can put that up to, I don't know, 100. Even that seems a bit too fast. I think I had it on 85 before. Now we've got shoulder spray. I haven't got that on at all at the moment, but let's just pop that up. You can see now it's got a bit more of a action, and they've also got one for hips. Turn that up to 50 as well. I suppose it just adds a bit more, flourishes to the character. Now what you got to bear in mind, now this is set up as a default by the Adobe Character Animator team for a kind of roughly, standard size human character with human proportions. Now our Bambi here is a little bit more squat, so I've rigged this up to work well, but like for example the coding, the programming, whatever way they've rigged it up doesn't always work great with some of the other settings. So like slump, I mean you can play around with the settings to try and get it to work a bit better. Strut, it's alright. It's a bit hyper, it's moving a bit too fast. But generally, if I want the character to be running and whatnot, now let's just see how run looks. It's worked quite well actually. But with some characters that aren't set up how Adobe Character Animator imagines a human proportion to be, it can go a bit weird, which you'll see when we get to the motion library. Motion library again is set up for what they consider normal human proportions, and it works. it's not a catch-all. Some of the motion things will work well, some of them won't. We'll see that when we get to it, which I think is chapter 8. Anyway, let's just put this back to walk. And what are the other options? You got arm, swing. Now them things can get a bit finicky. You can play around with them, but if you find it doesn't work well and it kind of goes a bit haywire, you press this little X and it should turn everything back to the default that I've set the characters up. Pin feet when standing, if you turn that off, you'll notice that what that basically does is that it brings the feet back together when you stop moving. If you don't have them together, when you're moving, sometimes you can get caught with the feet, you know, like apart and whatnot. So keep that on. Strength is obviously, if I was to turn this down, you know, all them settings will, you know, won't be as strong. But we'll leave that as 100 and we'll not mess around with that one there. So that is the settings for your walk. Now the one thing I will say about walk, when you start messing around with all these things and that, depending on your computer, sometimes it can drop, your frame rate can go a little bit laggy while it's running. So when you're animating everything, I would say turn off your walk behavior, and if you do have any lag on your frame rate, you'll see that once you turn off the walk, it will go back up to normal. So, you know, as I showed in the previous chapter, you can animate in layers. So get all your other animations done, and then when you're ready, drop in your walk animation last, or even do it first, but then whenever you finish doing it, you turn it off. Now, if you haven't got your character just walking on the spot and you do want them walking around, you have to use, you can't actually use the left and right. It gets a bit confusing. I'm not going to get into it now, but if you record the character walking using the keyboard, when you go back and play it, it'll just work. So like, let's say I stop the character here, but when you go back and play, when it gets to that point where I press the trigger, it's just going to trigger it to walk off like that. That's not what we want. So the way that you do it for your timeline animation is that you change this to position based, and then you go down to position and you see this little clock, stop clock icon. You press that, and then when you look at your timeline, you just got to find it wherever it shows up. Here we go, we got walk. So your starting position is 0, and then so we are going to press this little thing here. Well, sorry, I just turned it off. It was already put there. Right, so let's say I want him to walk along to, you know, the other side of the page. I'm going to put another keyframe, and then I am going to hold my finger down on this, and I'm going to move him along. I mean, you can either dial in a number. You can literally, I could type in -3000, or you can drag it along to wherever you want him to go. And now if I go back and press play, right, that's too slow. So too fast. So I'm now grabbed that keyframe and I've moved it along. Zoom out a little bit. Now you might think that's okay, or still too fast. And that is it. That's all you need to do for your keyframe in your walk position. So I think that gives you the broad idea of how to use walk behavior in Adobe Character Animator. Again, as I've said earlier, there are more in-depth videos about how all of these behaviors and features work. You can just put Adobe Character Animator walk behavior, and there's videos out there that are a couple of minutes long which probably say the same thing that I've just said, or you can get videos that are like half-hour long and I'll go into all the ins and outs and maybe highlight any issues that you might run into, or give you more tips and tricks. But I'm trying to keep this video, overall video, as concise as possible, So with that said, let's move along to chapter 7, which is the virtual camera system. Chapter 7, camera system. This is a relatively new addition to Adobe Character Animator. I'll say new, well, it might already be 2 years now. But yeah, camera system's great. Originally what we used to have to do is we'd animate the character, maybe add in the backgrounds and whatnot, but then eventually you'd have to export it out to something like After Effects or Premiere if you wanted to add in all like the, you know, camera cuts, zooming in, or this, that and the other. However, you can now do that in Adobe Character Animator. So how do you do it? Pretty simple. We go to, if I can recall, we go to scene and we go new scene, camera. For whatever reason you might have different things set up. Let's just call this one Vambicam. Right, so you click on that and you can see over now in the left hand corner the camera system setup is replaced the other properties. Right, so it's all at default at what it currently is, and let's say I want to have, let's just go for the standard, like variations of zoom in. So let's just zoom into head and shoulders. Ooh. And I'm going to go create triggerable shot. Basically these are just making triggers, and I'll show you how they work in a second. Now let's zoom in a bit more and go for a head and shoulders shot. Make another trigger, and finally let's go for extreme close-up. Make that a shot. And then when you've got all them set up, press the little X and go back to your default. Now, just like your replays before, these have created a bunch of triggers, which you also see over here in the trigger system. So we are going to click on the triggers over on the left hand side of the screen. Also, I just want to point out, if I ever get things mixed up, if I'm referring to this side as left and left and right, the reason for that is it's not that I don't know my left to right, because I've been working in Adobe Character Animator for so long. They refer to things as left and right from the character's perspective point of view. So like that is the character's right arm, even though it's on the left hand side of the screen, and that's the left arm even though it's on the right hand side of the screen. But sometimes they, well, for example, when they do body turns, they'll refer to that as the right and that as the left. It does get confusing, and thinking back now, I can't remember if I've been referring to this as the left side or the right side of the screen. Probably left, because I'm so used to working from the character's perspective. Anyway, over here on the left side of the screen, in the trigger system, you select your trigger, you press enter, and the first one was, what was it now? Mid shot, we'll call it. No, we'll call it mid zoom. And we'll call this one head and shoulders. And we're going to call this one face. Actually, what you should really do is name these ones here. Mid zoom, shoulder, face. Now I know I've just typed it twice, but for you not to have to type it twice, name them on this side first, select them, and then drag that into triggerable shots. And if I want to rename that swap set, I can do so for cameras. Right, so a couple of things to mention here. So first of all, if I just press this, it'll just have a hard cut. So if, again, a bit like with the swap set, I'll show you a way of being able to do this a bit quicker. So if we press record, and we do that, Actually, there's two ways of doing it. Where'd I gone? Oh no, I know what's happening here. Basically, if you select on scene here, and we're in scene V 1.6, that has a thing called Smart Replays. Now, Smart Replays is where you can create a trigger and then drop them triggers into the timeline. It sounds okay, but it actually takes away some of the options. So I prefer, and also, remember I told you earlier about creating the arm replays. Now, if you've got Smart Replays activated, and you can, like I said, go and watch tutorial videos specifically about Smart Replays, but as a quick explanation, if you created an arm replay, when you drag it into the timeline, it's just going to be one bar, and it's just going to be whatever you recorded, which sounds good, but a lot of the times you're going to want to adjust things. So like, you might record this, but you might want to use that action again, but you won't want them to go faster, or it might be like, oh, you know, you might want to make adjustments to it, you know, like slow it down, ease into it faster or slower. If you've got a Smart Replay, you can't do any of that because it's just one bar dropped in as you recorded it. So if you want to be able to adjust all the different layers that you recorded, turn that off. Right, so like I said, you select your scene, make sure that Smart Replays is turned off. That's the way I do it. You might prefer the other way because there's less bars in your timeline and it's a bit neater looking, but for the sake of customizing and having more control over what is happening, I prefer to have that turned off and to be able to see everything. Right, so here we are, we've got, drop that down. So first thing I'll do is you can select this and then you can go to edit and go to copy, and then select that again and just go paste. Right, so you go to paste, and you can drag that out for however long you want it to be. However, you might not want it to be cold cut, hard cut, whatever you pronounce it. You might want it to zoom in. So again, like them arm movements, you drag the little square at the beginning and you can blend in. For example, you might want it to be like a very slow, you know, you might want the camera to very slowly zoom in throughout the course like that. Now at the moment that it's got a blend on it, you might want it to be no easing, so it's just a very even. So if you press play, however at one point you might want it to do a quick cut to the face. So if you select face, go edit, copy, and then paste, zoom in, make sure this is dropped down. Again, we're going to blend it in. Just to give it that more fluidity. Now, these ones here, as you know, are hard cuts. So let's just call that hey C. Now, why am I doing that? The reason for that is that this one here with the zoom in, I might want that as a trigger as well. So now I've got them, I'm going to right click and I'm going to create a replay, and I'm going to call this face zoom. And then if I press that, and I can assign a keyboard button to this. Again, you might want to use characters in real time. So if we look over here, that's the new camera trigger I just made. In fact, I'm going to delete that one off, and I'm going to add this to here. But this little box here, I'm going to press the number 1. So that's the key and the keyboard that I want to assign to that particular zoom. So let's say I'm live and I'm performing. So make sure you got both your Vambi and the camera selected at the same time. The way to do that is hold your finger down on control and select your character, and then we're going to turn on all them actions. So here I am, I'm performing live, and then I want the camera to zoom in on me, so I'm going to press number 1, zooms in, zooms out. Again, it's another tool, weapon in your arsenal to, you know, get the most advanced looking character as you can. So yeah, that is how you use the camera system, and that just means that, you know, you can do a lot more in this program. But there are some other things, like, you know, you want to bring in the background and whatnot, so we'll get into that in the next chapter, in chapter 8. Hello, chapter 8, which is backgrounds. Like I said, lots of people might just animate their character in Adobe Character Animator and export it to composite it in a different program, but you might want to make everything right here in Adobe Character Animator. So, backgrounds. I've already imported a file, same as everything else. Just go to import, find wherever you got something saved on your computer. You can bring in a JPEG, but you can also, I would recommend bringing in a Photoshop file. Reason is, actually, this is something I never mentioned earlier. This is an important one. So whatever you got in your assets, in your program, whether that's your puppet file or if it's a background, whatever, if you click on the file and then press this little PS logo, or it might be an AI if you got an Illustrator file, but the master file for these puppets are Photoshop files. If you click on that, that will open up the master file in Photoshop. And any changes that you make to the puppet in Photoshop will update to Character Animator. So let's just click on this fella here, and he hasn't got a nose, has he? So I'm going to give him a nose just to demonstrate how you can update your puppet. So let's go to that. I'm going to call it nose, and I've put a little plus sign to make it independent. And the reason I've made it independent is that I don't want it anchored to the face, because when it comes back into Adobe Character Animator, it's going to recognize the word nose, it's going to convert it to a nose, and that's going to automatically have parallax and move it around the face. So let's give it a nose. So I'm going to pick this color, I'm going to make it slightly darker. I'm going to get a circle. I'm going to pop that in there. And that's going to be his nose. And let's go to save. And you can see down here it is saving. Then I'm going to go back to Adobe Character Animator, and it's importing the updates. And you can now see he's got a little nose. Now, however, if I was to flip the character, let's make sure that's selected. Triggers are turned on. That nose disappears because I only put the nose in. If we go back into Photoshop, where is it? You'll see that the character is actually made up of two folders. So you got this folder, and then you got the flipped folder. So if you add any artwork to the one turn, you got to make sure that you also add that artwork to the other turn. But for the sake of demonstration, we'll just leave it in the one. So anyway, yeah, any changes you make to the master file, once you save it, they will update to this one. Right, I'm going to go and get rid of this nose. Right, anyway, the main point of this chapter is backgrounds. So the reason that I went into that, went off trail a little bit, it did all have a point. If you've got a background, when you if you import it as a Photoshop file, if you want to make any changes to it, you can literally just go into the Photoshop file, tweak things, and then it will update automatically to this. So right, I brought in a flat, all that's the image, the background image I brought in is just a flat JPEG. So I'm going to bring that in. And I'm going to downsize it. So let's scale. I'm going to uplarge it just a little bit, and I'm going to push that up there. Oop. I'm going to bring that over there, and you'll see why in a minute. And I'm going to grab my little Vambi baby man, and I'm going to go to transform because I'm going to move him about. Bring him down. Maybe scale him down a little bit. Put him on the pavement. Right, now the reason for this is that you can now take your background and you can animate the background in the same way you can animate your character. So I'm going to add a transform because I'm going to have my little man walking, but as I showed you earlier, I don't want him to move. I'm going to have the background move instead. So we're going to go to walk, and we are going to have body. Where is it? Oh, sorry, no. I need to change it to left and right arrow key. And then body speed we are going to turn to nothing. So that means when I press left and right, he's just walking on the spot. Now, to give the illusion that he's moving, I'm going to move the background. So we're going to select city, and we are going to see that over here on the right hand side of the screen where it says puppet behaviors, and we're going to look at transform, and then we're going to look at position X, and we're going to press this little stopwatch, and then we're going to go to the start of our timeline, and we're going to add in a keyframe, and then we're going to go to the end of our timeline, and the end of the timeline is going to be at the end of the audio file. Zoom in a little bit. Delete that one off there, put in a new keyframe, and I'm going to move this along to there. And now if we go back to the start and press play, so now we've got the background moving. Now we just need to get him moving. I'm going to press Control and select on here to turn off all the behaviors, and then I'm just going to select walk on its own. Now earlier when I showed you the walk thing, I wanted the character moving around the screen, and I showed you how to do that using the position thing, because if you use the left and right on the character, it can mess it up. However, in this instance, I want the character to just be walking on the spot. So I'm going to use the left and right. I'm going to press on the keyboard, and I'm going to press record. I press stop there, and now I'm going to press play, and there you go. Now the only thing you might spot there is, if we move back a bit, here, that telephone pole or light, whatever it is, shouldn't be, that should be in the foreground, so that should like go over him. So what you would need to do in this instance is you will go into your original file and delete that out. Then you could bring that in on its own and then put that in the layer above the character and have that moving at its perspective, so that would be moving slower than the background. Look at the old Disney cartoons where they show you how they do all this stuff. So there you go, that's a little tip for you. So that is my little tip just for bringing in backgrounds and animating them. And then obviously if it's a cutscene, you know, what you can do then is, let's say when we get to the end of the dialogue, we go to a different scenery. So select that and press Control Shift D, and it cuts it, and delete that off, and then you can drop in another scene. And then this bar here is what's controlling the walk. So if I just move that down to there, should be walking, and then stop. So that is backgrounds. Next, we're going to get into the motion library. Chapter 9, which is motion library. Right, now this is a brand new feature for Adobe Character Animator. And basically what it is they've made a whole bunch of actions. I think there's like almost 300 of all sorts. Now, as I covered earlier, obviously they programmed in actions for what they consider normal proportions a human being, and my Bambi doesn't fit those same proportions. You know, his head is about the same size as his body. So and also some of these motions are made for characters frontally faced, some are made for characters side on, so it's not a catch-all. Some of these motions work really well, some of them don't work at all. So it's just a bonus really. If you can find something that looks good, great. If it doesn't, then move on to the next one. I've already used this. If you look at our trailer video, there's a video where you see my characters doing like a hip-hop dance and whatnot. So I do know it works. So let's have a look at what does, what doesn't, how you can kind of fix it. Right, so if we scroll down on the right hand side of the screen in properties, we should find one of these, which is called motion library. So we're going to click that down, and at the moment you can see it's set to none. So all we got to do is pick down here, click down there, sorry, and let's just go for a dance. Let's go for hip hop dance 1. Yeah, it's not too bad. But you can adjust it. Right, I think as a default it's kind of set up, it assumes that the character is frontal, so it's, you know, square on looking at the camera. So what you need to do is adjust the orientation. So I think if we move this to about, if you just start sliding it around, you'll see that the character starts moving, and that might be for better or it might be for worse. I'm going to put that about 30%, or you see if you go too much it goes all a bit crazy. And then also it's still picking up some of your body action, and you can pick, you know, you might, for example, you might not want the arms going. So what you do, you go left wrist, turn that off. Right wrist, turn that off, and we're going to get rid of the elbows as well. So now it's just kind of giving that body movement. Or you might think, actually I want to keep the arms in, but it's kind of leaning back too much or whatnot. So let's take out the waist and see how that works. You see what I mean? It's a case of, as I said before, a lot of this is trial and error. Going through, picking, you know, going through the settings, seeing what works for you, what works for your animation. But I will show you another thing. Let's change this to a walk behavior. Let's just go for normal walk. Right, first of all, you see he's kind of disappearing off. We don't want that. So I'm going to refresh the scene, and I'm going to change this root position to treadmill. So now it's just staying on the spot. Again, if you animate like I showed you with the background chapter, you know, you can keep him in the spot. At the moment it's got a kind of like lazy, you know, but that might work for what you're animating, or it might not. Again, the orientation is kind of leaning back. Let's see if we can straighten him up a bit. There you go. It's a bit better. Again, you can speed it up. Or you can slow it down. You know, if it's an old man character and whatnot. Like, as I said previously, you can go into the Adobe character. So you can go into Photoshop character, and if you wanted him to be an old man, just draw on some wrinkles on him, save it, and then hey presto, same if you want to put clothes on him, a hat on him and stuff like that. Just load it into the Photoshop file, save it, and you can customize your own character. So yeah, you got loads of stuff on here. You got, you know, idling so that the character isn't just stood still. Let's see what we got. Sad. I suppose that's just kicking the dirt and whatnot. Again, you have to adjust this orientation. I mean, like I said, there's hundreds, so I'm not going to go through all of them. Let's have a look at one of the fighting ones though. Yeah, that one looks a bit completely off. So, like I said, not all of them will work. You got to play around with the settings, but you know, you can get it to work for you. So that is Motion Library. To reiterate, you can have them, you know, moving off the spot, or you can keep them rooted to the spot. To do that, obviously, you just adjust. Oh, where is it? Just adjust it if you want it on treadmill, on continuous, or reset at the loop is where it will go through the action, stop, and then go back to the beginning. So if you've got him walking, you might do that, and then go back and walk. Whatever suits your animation. As you know, this character can be flipped. So if he is flipped, you're going to want to mirror the action. Otherwise, the actions are going to be going in the wrong direction. Preferred, or you can set a default so that whatever you set it up as, it will, you know, apply that to all the different actions. Advanced, what's this? Add an additional offset view. I haven't, this is a brand new feature, so I haven't jumped massively into it. I have used it, and I've used it a few times, and it's been great, really. But there is a whole video on it. I think it's like half-hour long. So yet again, check out OK Samurai's YouTube channel, which is the official channel for Character Animator, and you can jump a lot more into it. Again, I want to just keep this video as give you the information, hopefully tell you a lot and help you out, but I'm not going to go super deep into everything, otherwise this video would be far too long. Right, so I believe that's the end of this chapter. Wonder what we're going to talk about next. Chapter 10. We're almost finished. Hopefully you find this all of, you know, good use. Right, so chapter 10 is, yeah, what to do when your animation is finished. So this is about exporting. So, pretty straightforward, but there are a couple of options. You go to File and go to Export, and you've got Quick Export. So this is just if you want to quickly export a normal video. You can pick high, medium or low quality and export to wherever you want to save it on your computer. The clue is in the name. It's a quick export. Right, what are the other options? Well, we've got video via Adobe Media Encoder. If you've got Adobe, you'll have Media Encoder. If you don't, you can download it. And basically this option is just to export it as a video. Normal video. You can go into the settings and choose, you know, what format you want it to be as. I'm not going to go into all the ins and outs of that. Just, you know, export it as a video. You've got export as an alpha. So what that basically means is you can export your character, but the background will be transparent. So you can just take this character, however you've animated it, and drop it into a composition you might be doing elsewhere in like After Effects or Premiere or any other program, because once you've got that video file, you can bring it into any other program that you might be using and layer it in over whatever else you're doing. ping sequence. This is often popular because sometimes the alpha files can get pretty big, where you ping sequence and wave. So basically what that does is that it renders out every individual frame as a ping, and then, you know, like your audio file. And then if you go into something like Premiere, you select the first folder, and then you press the little tag underneath to select all, and it brings it in as one video file. And then you bring in the audio file as well. And then last of all, you got Adobe Dynamic Link. So basically, if you open up something like Premiere, you can select that and it will link directly to Character Animator. So the good thing, the best benefit about that is that if you're animating it, if you're compositing it in Premiere and you want to maybe just adjust something to fit the music better, or to fit the cut better, or to trim something, you can go into Character Animator, make the adjustment, and then when you go back into Premiere, that adjustment will be there, opposed to having to come back into this and re-rendering it as a ping sequence or an alpha thing, and then going into the other program and swapping out the files. So it is much more cleaner. The only word of warning with Adobe Dynamic Link is that sometimes people can have issues with the link where it might not connect. Again, this is all down to different computers. I can't guarantee if it'll work good on one computer. It might work completely fine on another computer. Everyone has different setups, so your experience is going to be different. If you do want to know more about Adobe Dynamic Link, look it up on YouTube. Lots and lots of videos. What else have we got? Frame, that's if you just want to export an individual frame. If you're making a thumbnail for your YouTube video, you can export a frame of your character in a specific pose that you want to use. Puppet, that's exporting your puppet file. So for example, you think, oh, why do I want to do that? Well, let's say you've made a whole bunch of replays and you want to keep that and bring this puppet into another file. Export that puppet with all your replays and everything you've added into it, so that you've got it for another one. And live options, that is if you want to use your character in real time on something like Twitch, if you're using it as a gaming thing, or even on YouTube, Facebook Live and whatnot. But that is a whole other thing that I'm not going to get into right now. Again, I might make a video about that later on, but if not, just go onto YouTube and look up Adobe Character Animator live, and there are videos all about how to do that. You can look on the OK Samurai page. I know he's got videos there. So yeah, last thing I'll mention about this is, do you do everything in Adobe Character Animator, or do you use Adobe Premiere, After Effects, or one of them other video editing softwares? There's lots available. Where I can, I do most of it in Character Animator, but you can't do everything in this. For example, if I want to layer in some green screen effects, like smoke and rain, if I want to have, like, when you bring in the audio, you don't have a lot of control over the audio here. So I might want to do it in Premiere so that I can adjust the audio, ease in and out of the audio, add more effects to the audio, add effects to his voice, make it sound like he's in an echoey room. And again, with the transitions, as I was talking earlier, if you want to change the scene, you'd have to just do a cold cut to the next scene. Whereas you might want to do, a much more detailed flourish transition, where like the Star Wars style swipes, or radius, or blends into another shot, or fades out and all that. That's not really stuff that you can do in this. And also you might want to add in text. So if you want to make something really advanced, that's when you're going to use Adobe Premiere or After Effects. But if it's just your character, simple cartoon, don't forget you've got all the camera zooms in this, so you can still make it look dynamic. There is a lot that you can do in Adobe Character Animator. So that's the last I'm going to say on that. So yeah, one last chapter. Chapter 11, the outro, the end. Hopefully you found that all super useful and interesting and valuable. If there's anything that you didn't understand or you want more information about, drop me a message either in Discord or email, or maybe in a comment wherever you're seeing this video. I'd imagine it'll be posted in a few places. But get in touch, let me know, and I will either answer your query or I'll do another screen recording like this and just demonstrate how to do whatever it is you need to know about. But before I just say goodbye and good luck and all that, and I look forward to seeing what you do with these animated characters, I thought I'd do one last little thing, and I'm going to animate the arm waving. Right, so if I was animating a wave, this is how I'd do it. First of all, I would turn off all the actions, and the only one I want to really be controlling is the trigger. So I'm going to put the arm up there, and I'm going to go up to timeline, and I'm going to record 2 frames. I'm going to collapse this down so I can see what I've just done. Right, so arm going up and arm going down. Zoom out a little bit. Alright, let's press play. Right, so we got the arm up. Now we need the arm. So we got the arm up, up there, and then we want it to go down, and then we're going to do back and forth. So let's zoom in a little bit. Let's have a look. Where was that? There we go, right up there. Let's drag this now to over like that. Again, timeline, record another 2 frames. Normally for my easing in and out, I normally go for 3 or 4 frames on average. Let's have a look how that looks. So up, down. And sometimes I like to, let's see, we're going to ease in and we're going to ease out here. I'm going to move that along to there, and then I'm going to ease in, and then I'm going to grab that one, I'm going to edit, and I'm going to go to duplicate, and I'm going to pop that there. See how that looks. That's a bit too stunty. In and out. In and out. We're just going to put it back to, I think this will be the best way to do it. In and out. Maybe make it 2 frames longer. 1, 2. Alright, see how that looks. Maybe the arm extends out a bit too much, but for the purpose of demonstration, you get the point. It's more important I'm showing you how I'm doing it. So let's press play there. And then I'm going to duplicate that a couple of more times. Sorry, I copied that there, didn't I? What I want to do is duplicate it. So Control and D. So Control D. Control D. Control D. Control D, yeah. And then this one here. Right, let's see how that looks. It's alright, not the best wave in the world, but I'm not going to mess around, with the blends and all that at the moment. You can all have a play with it. So anyway, that's in waving, and of course you can also use that for waving when it comes into a shot. You don't want to have to do this every single time, so what we do now is that we select all those, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to create a replay trigger. And I'm going to call this wave. And I'm going to press play. Oh, I'm going to have to remember to turn the triggers back on. There you go. And you can use that whenever you want. You can either record and press play. So you could press record and do it that way. And you'll see it pop up there. Or you can select that and go to edit, copy and paste it. And you'll get up how you originally recorded it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if you select scene and have this as a smart replay, that will just be one bar. But when you do that, you lose the ability. Like for this one in the timeline, you might want it to only be a short wave. You might want to, take out them three and just make it that long. Or you might want it to be, I don't know, be a sarcastic wave, a slow wave, or is it like an elderly character, it's a slow wave. So you might want to, make them longer. And if you've got it as a smart one, you don't have the ability to do that. So that's it. That was my last little tip. Hopefully you enjoyed all that. Any questions, just let me know. And just enjoy animating with the Vambies. I look forward to seeing what you create. Bye.